What's up everyone, Beast Mode back here with another video. So today I am lucky enough to cover one of the top 16 deck lists from the recent in-person RBET, which took place in Moreno Valley. It was hosted by Keegan and E3 YouTube channel. Most of you are already aware of him. He's growing the community. He's trying to grow both the online and the paper community, hosting in-person tournaments that are becoming very large. I think this event was roughly 200-ish players. I was able to catch the event on stream. Unfortunately, I was unable to attend this event in California. For me, it's a 6-hour flight from the East Coast, and I was fortunate enough to play in the very first in-person RBET that was in Fullerton, California. So I did get that in-person experience, and I'm hoping to play in the Orlando RBET. So I will tag him in the title of this video. Of course, if you're not subscribed to his channel, I highly recommend doing so. He's hosting the premier series of tournaments. They've been large tournaments for the past year, over a year at this point. So this here is Dylan Mauceri's hybrid Blackwing deck. I'm hoping I say his last name proper, but I apologize if not. So again, looking at this deck, you just say, oh, it's a hybrid Blackwing deck. But there is one piece of tech here that I think is actually being slept on by a lot of people. And I sat down and looked at this deck before making the video, obviously, and said, what can Morphing Jar do for this deck? And I actually think it's pretty creative because, you obviously want to discard the cards in your hand if they're Values and Sirokkos, number one. Number two, this card can just cheat advantage from your opponent very easily because it's not expected often at all. So what I'm saying is people are worried about Icarus attack and value usually turn one. If you know, especially once you know you're playing Blackwings, someone sets, T-sets the turn one Blackwing players T-setting a monster and spell a trap, you're already thinking it's likely a value Icarus. So what happens is your opponent will usually summon just one monster and attack. And if that happens, it can be a Morphing Jar, and then you can just ditch your hand there, and hopefully you have Value or Sirocco in the hand, and then you get get to draw a fresh hand. What you can even take more advantage of is if you end up setting a Value with 2 or 3 trap, and they don't have the Heavy Storm. Even if they do, you have Starlight Road to help protect that and Solemn. But you can also generate a bunch of advantage that way too, because now they also still think that there's an Icarus attack down there, so they might just summon the one monster and attack, and now you're going to get like a +3 off of Morphing Jar. And any deck that gets a +3 is probably just going to win the game. So this card here really can create some situations. It's kind of like Morphing Jar in Gladiator Beast, similar, where you don't know if it's like a Hiplomas face down or not, so you're worried about attacking it. Same idea here. This card kind of pretends it's a value often, and then you can just set a bunch of back row behind it, and your opponent never wants to commit more than one card because they think it's a Icarus attack value play, and then you just generate a bunch of advantage. So I do see why this card is in the deck. I think it's actually pretty smart, and I think that this may be a staple moving forward. I think this is a really good idea. Just because of the trickery that it presents. There's some other tech in this deck too. The Giant Trunade is often not seen, but it makes sense here too because you really need to stick the Shura with the Whirlwind. That's a big focus, obviously, with the deck. It lets you make those power pushes, and you don't have to worry about back row. So this is a little tech here. You don't see this commonly in these decks. Everything else looks pretty standard. I like the one Starlight Road, especially with the Morphing Jar, so you feel very safe setting 3-4 back row behind Morphing Jar, and then you just get like a +4 if your opponent doesn't match you. And they often aren't going to do that turn one. Once they see it, they're going to play a little bit smarter, but this can definitely catch people off guard. Let's see sideboard here. Sideboard's pretty standard, I think, at this point. Fossil Dyne is in pretty much everybody's sideboard. It's one of the most sideboarded cards at this time just due to frogs. Snowman is also another good side deck choice for both the Mirror match or Blackwing match and the Hero Beat matchup. Nobleman's pretty good against Value Turbo and can hit some of the zombie stuff too. But once especially me being a zombie player, once I see a Nobleman, I'm just never summoning a Pyramid. I'm never setting a Pyramid Turtle or Tomato. They're always just going to be summoned. So the one Dust Tornado here, one Light Mirror. I think this is probably just enough. If you side deck 3 of these, it's just overkill. 2 may be the right number. It's hard to say. The Lightsworn deck have not been too common as of late. Fairies is kind of like it is a difficult matchup for Blackwing, so I see why there's at least one Light Mirror in the sideboard. One Pulling the Rug, one Deck Devi. Deck Devi's a really strong card. It's Blackwings can play it, but this is hybrid, so it's even quicker. So this card is actually better in this type of build than it is just the pure Blackwing build. And then, of course, you always have the second Royal Oppression because it's one of the best Royal Oppression decks in the format. And extra deck looks pretty standard, I would say. So this does have a few pieces of tech here. I know everyone's kind of sick of seeing Blackwing and builds like that because they're very common, but this does have some sweet tech here with the Trunade. But this Morphing Jar here, I feel, is actually really strong, and I do think I'm going to try to test a little bit more of it. It's kind of a card that I have forgotten about. It's often over, just an oversight. I think this card can be really good in value too, value turbo, just because I know you make the argument where you might want to set a Hamster or a Raikou, but this card here could also play a similar role where they don't want to play into the back row or into the face-down monster because they think it's a Raikou. And you could generate a lot of advantage that way. And also you can pitch the Vayu and the Sirocco from your hand. Granted, your opponent is also doing the same thing, so you have to be mindful of that. But I think that this card here, you don't really care that your opponent's discarding. I think that you're looking for just the sheer advantage that this card can generate if you can trick your opponent into attacking before they're setting a bunch of cards, and you can just win a game that way. Also, Morphing Jar can get you back into a game. So if you happen to fumble some of the early game, maybe you're sitting in the mid game and you're down a few cards, this card can kind of cheat you back into the game. So I do think that this card is pretty cool. I think that there may be some more of this seen in some of these decks here. Maybe even pure Blackwing can play it. Possibly. I think that there's really no differences to why they can't, right? You're always worried about Vayu and Icarus attack. I think Vayu could play this deck, or play this card rather, in the deck. Zombies, maybe. There's a lot of cards you want in the graveyard, but also they're not as graveyard dependent as you would think. Like Book of Life is obviously very important, but it's not as free as some of these decks here. Like when instantly Vayu and Sirocco are in the graveyard, you got instant pluses there. You really have to rely on zombies drawing a Book of Life to make use of it, unless it's Mizuki, of course. But I do think this is pretty cool. And again, that's pretty much all we have for today. I just wanted to cover this top 16 deck list. And big shout out to Keegan for sharing the list with me. Next video, I'm hoping to cover maybe the Vayu Turbo deck just to see why the deck is so strong and doing so well as of late. I'm sure some of the other Edison content creators that most of you are already following will probably get some of the other top 8 list. So with that being said, I'll see you all on the next one.